That way, for the lovely people who are here early, they can drop off as quickly as possible. And so, Bia, we are waiting for you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Ultimate Clinical Research Toolbox or the UCRTB webinar. I am Bea, assistant to Tengu, and I will be working with you in the background to assist you with all things related to the UCRTB online training program. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know what we're going to do in today's event. On your screens, you'll see participants interface where you can see the microphone and video icons, the participant list, chat reactions, or emoticons. Please click on the participants list so that you'll be able to raise hand when you have questions or are experiencing technical issues. We have everybody else automatically muted so that we don't hear background noises as others join in. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to us by typing your questions in the chat box. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. You could also raise your hand by pressing the hand button and we'll have you unmuted before you speak up for your questions. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Tego Muna, the founder and the CEO of the Achaibo Clinical and the creator of our online course, The Ultimate Clinical Research Toolbox.
Wow, thank you, Bea. What a lovely introduction. So I always start off by introducing the team. You just met Bea, who does all our welcome on our webinars, and she is the one, I would say, a wing beneath our wings, right? A wing beneath our wind. And so we also have Lee, who is our social media queen, and she gets to keep the platform really running on social media and customer service. And then we have Queenie. Queenie is I think what you say, you are Queenie the Bodhisattva. She's basically supports all of us. So when I have issues, we all go to Queenie, and Queenie runs the whole platform. And I was getting a lot of questions about the company at Tribal Clinical because I know everyone always joins in and we always talk about the ultimate clinical research toolbox. And so as I start, I'm going to talk a little bit about a Tribal Clinical and some of the other things that we do and why I am really focusing on expanding the clinical research hub in Africa. So on this webinar, which I'm really excited about, is that we have been doing a series on the good clinical practices, just because it's really important that people have a foundational education about, the laws that govern clinical trials. And so this is our third week, and we're basically just going through the good clinical practices based on the FDA guidance on March 2018, and we're just literally just going through the whole document, and I'm educating and providing some coaching on some of the terms and so what some of the expectations are when you're in a clinical trial. So today we're going to talk a little bit about me, and I'm going to talk about our tribal clinical and what it's about, just because I'll be getting a lot of questions about that. We're going to dive into good clinical practices. I promise it's not going to be boring. I always make it fun with really good examples that everyone can understand and digest. I'm going to talk about the ultimate clinical research toolbox, which is a one coaching modality that we do at Tribal Clinical. I'm going to demo the online portion of the program, and then we're going to go into Q&A. Okay. Before proceeding, is everyone up to speed? Just give me a thumbs up so that way I know I'm not speaking to myself. Okay, great. Good. Okay, great. So that's me. I have been in the clinical research space for over 16 years, and I will not go too much into the details of my experience, but basically I came into the industry and then eventually got to the global level and created my own company. And so what I really do is I consult on large global clinical trials. I work with key opinion leaders who are just people who are a lot of the investigators running the trials who really provide a lot of expertise and knowledge as to what we do. And I really focus now on trials in the emerging markets like Africa, some parts of Asia and South America. And so that's a bit about my experience. Now, I have participated in so many different types of trials across different therapeutic areas with various sponsors, small, mid-size, and large, and pharmaceuticals and biotechnology. And just because I'm always in a position where I'm coaching and mentoring, large project teams across the globe, it's just become one of my passions. And the reason why I created this company was because I just found that there was a need for more clinical research professionals in Africa, and particularly the developing world. And that the reason why a lot of people do not participate or are not aware of this industry is just because there's a lack of education and knowledge. And so what I've been doing is I've been educating professionals on the continent and in the diaspora, and also helping companies to identify the right research facilities on the African continent. And a lot of my experience regarding the best ways to run clinical trials, to train people, to coach them, comes from a lot of the audits that I've participated in globally. And of course, I've also helped to implement best practices on how to run clinical trials operationally. And in addition to that, I am very prolific in online and offline marketing as well. So now let me talk a little bit about Achaibo Clinical. So see, this Ultimate Clinical Research Toolbox program is just one coaching modality within the company. So what Achaibo Clinical does, it's really simple. We pre-register clinical research sites. So if you have a site and you're having trouble finding clinical trials, we pre-register you. You have to go through a series of questionnaires. And then when a sponsor contacts us and they need maybe sites in Kenya, then we say, okay, these are the facilities and the investigators who might be interested in participating. That's one thing that we do. We also register vendors. So if you have a company that maybe is a manufacturing company and you manufacture certain types of supplies that can be used for clinical trials, we also put you in our database. Then we also have the coaching and the coaching piece, which is the Ultimate Clinical Research Toolbox, which is an online offline program which shows people how to set up a clinical research site in a way that is ensures a safety of patients and quality of the data that will be taken from your site as a result of the trials you're running. The other modality, the other program that we have, which is an offshoot of this, is that there are many professionals who are in the industry and they're not sure on how they would like to proceed. So what we do is we coach them and train them on, what is the next step in your career, or do you want to get into the industry? We educate you about the industry, we bring you in, and then you have the opportunity to interview with some of the sponsors that we deal with. So that's a little bit about Achaibo Clinical. Now, this is the world distribution of trials. And as you can see, if you look at the emerging markets, I mean, there's all this green. It just means that they don't have a lot of clinical trials that they're running. And I have basically managed trials all over the globe, everywhere, from the US to everywhere, right? And so all I would say is, I'm in situations where I'm doing a 9 p.m. call with Japan, and then I'm getting up like at 5 to do another call. I mean, it can be very interesting. But what I get from this is that there is such an opportunity, particularly in Africa, to have a robust industry there. And there's so many benefits to running clinical trials, from not just the income potential for principal investigators, but when a country runs clinical trials, then you're exposed to so many other things. You can contribute to clinical trial protocols. You can have so many clinical research professionals who in turn are now able to work in that industry. You can host seminars, you can host webinars. So it just creates so many opportunities for people in that country. Now we're going to dive into some of the terms in the good clinical practices. The first one I want to talk about today is blinding and masking. So in a clinical trial, we ensure that for various reasons. I mean, there are trials that we have, we call them open label trials, which just means that everyone in the clinical trial is aware of the treatment assignment. So let's say we're studying, an aspirin, a drug for headache, right? And let's say it's aspirin, it's a different formulation of aspirin. Everybody knows that the subjects are actually taking aspirin. The subjects know it, the investigator know it, the people who are administering aspirin to them know it. Now, in blinding and masking, there are two things that we want to look at here. We have single masking, which usually means that the subject is unaware. So everybody else knows what this patient is going to be taking in the clinical trial, but they do not know. And then we have double masking where nobody knows what is being administered to this patient, right? Say, for example, I'm giving some examples about cassava studies, right? Where, we're doing a cassava study in a single masking scenario. The patient doesn't know that they're taking cassava. They will say this substance is substance, maybe Y123, but their doctor knows that they're in a clinical trial, to take some cassava. The investigator knows, the monitor knows, everybody knows, the pharmaceutical company knows. But then if it is double masking or double blinding, nobody knows. The pharma company doesn't know, the patient doesn't know. But now you might wonder, but then how will this be possible? Now, it's not defined here, but they typically have a team of people who are going to be the unblinded team. So only they would know. That's how it is typically run. So just to because we have to monitor things at the progress of the clinical trial, but we have to also ensure that in case there are events that actually come up, they're being managed by this team. So if you're in a clinical trial and you see an unblinding team, so you would see the normal operational team, and then you would have the unblinding team that is responsible for making sure that they see everything, they know what the patient is on, and then that way they can better manage the study from that perspective. And also from a safety point of view, actually want to make sure that in case something happens, you can easily address it. So that's just that for blinding and masking. There might be more, but I want to go as quickly as possible because these are all definitions. Case report form is huge, or CRF. Now, it's defined here as a printed optical or electronic document that is designed to record the protocol required information. So CRFs could be paper, and that's really rare now. Most studies are being run from an electronic standpoint. So the case report form is where everything is recorded. Now, I will explain this. You have a source, the source data. What that means is that it's the first point at which, whenever procedures are done, they record it on those documents. The case report form is completely different. It's typically supplied by the pharma company, and the clinical research side would gather all that data. If they have to take blood pressure, blood at specific times, or whenever the patient is getting their medication, or there's any other procedures that they have to conduct, they recorded it, and it's now recorded in the case report form. The case report form is what goes to the FDA. That's the basis of the data for the clinical trial. Now, but if something happens, then we have to go back to the beginning. The source data is the beginning of everything. And so when a clinical trial is being run, I say it's a dance between ensuring that the initial point of collection of the data that it's actually collected accurately per the protocol, and that whatever is transcribed on the case report forms, right, that is accurate as well. So as a clinical research site or clinical research investigator, you want to make sure that you're capturing that data correctly. And so there, in case it's not correct, the typically monitors will come out and take a look at the data. I mean, there's also centralized monitoring as well. So we're constantly looking at the data and saying, are they capturing this data according to what the protocol needs, right? Or whatever has been transcribed, is that accurate? In an electronic study, it's easy because once you have all that data, then there'll be queries that will be raised. Like if they see that the blood pressure is off, right? I mean, they're like, oh, their blood pressure is 310 over 500. I mean, I know that's impossible, but let's just give that example. And then it's, oh, that's absolutely incorrect. Can you verify that? So it's just a constant dance between the different data collection points. So that's the case reports form. Again, it's more E now. We get a lot more ECRF versus CRFs. Um, the next thing is the clinical trial study report. So at the end of the clinical trial at the clinical research site, there is a report that the sponsor does with the investigators. And so it typically captures everything that has happened across the whole project. So it will put together all the data that has been collected, all the safety, maybe all the safety issues that happen. There are patient narratives, which really look at everything that happened per patient. So it really, we gather all this data and then we use something, they have something called TLGs, what depending on where you are in the world, it's tables and graphs, and you put all of that data together. So that becomes a clinical study report. And it's basically a written description of the trial study. We're talking about the therapeutic benefits, the prophylactic, and the diagnostic things that have occurred in these human subjects as a result of being in the clinical trial. And it's a clinical and statistical description of everything that has happened. So we take it all and we condense it into one report, and it's called the clinical trial report. A comparator, that's our next definition. In a clinical trial, typically, we are studying the active product, which is, let's say, our cassava study, right? We know that we are um, studying how cassava gets, what happens when someone takes a cassava peel. Let's say, we've run some, preclinical studies. We realized that, when rats took cassava, maybe they saw better, they reacted to pain less, and just things like that. And these are just really hypothetical switch situations, so I really want people to understand. And then when we get into the clinical trial, the comparator is whatever we're comparing the cassava to. It could be a placebo or a sugar pill, and typically the patient does not know what they're taking. So the comparator is whatever is being compared to the active product. It could be a placebo, it could be plantains, right? It could be you're doing cassava and then the comparator is a plantain peel, right? So it's basically what we're using as a reference. And there's a reason for all of that, which I'll not go into, right? I mean, you probably heard all the stories about sometimes, the way that people react to the comparator is the same like the active product that you're doing the clinical research for. So, but it's a reference, and it's something that is used to actively control the clinical trial. The next thing we're looking at is compliance, okay? And compliance in this case, as you can see, it's very specific. It's in relation to the clinical trial itself. And just a thing that you really want to think about if you're coming into this industry in whatever capacity, adherence to good clinical practice, which is what we're learning right now, is so important. I always say a patient is safest in a clinical trial because remember, if you had listened to our previous calls, we have to make sure that if someone is participating with, in a clinical trial using a product that has, where we have not established, the safety parameters, then we really have to make sure that we take very good care of them. And so clinical trials, you absolutely have to follow all the regulatory drugs. Compliance is so huge. You have to be compliant to the clinical trial protocol, which is why, which is the Bible for your study. You have to be compliant to your local laws that, that affect clinical trials. You want to be compliant to regulatory laws of the country, the good clinical practices, across the world. And so that, and then of course, if you have an institutional review board, which is over your side, you want to be compliant to them. So if you're in this industry, we take this very seriously. I mean, there are definitely repercussions, and there are a lot of audits and a lot of inspections. Okay. Confidentiality is also huge in clinical trials. There's so many different documents that govern that. So we have the first level of confidentiality, where a patient is participating in the clinical trial at the site. You do not want to share any of their information with anybody else. I mean, that's just, I mean, if you're a healthcare professional, I'm sure that you actually know this. And of course, in the US, we have HIPAA, which actually covers that. But within the clinical trial, at the site level, no confidentiality cannot, you can't breach that. And then, of course, anybody who is participating in the clinical trial, whether it's from the sponsor company or their operations people to your side, and the ones who are actually running the project, everything remains confidential. Okay, you did not share anything about the patient, you did not share anything about the clinical trial, because it is a product that is being studied for a specific reason. There's so many things that are involved, and so we want to make sure that this information never goes anywhere. And that, and when you actually participate in a clinical trial, whether you're as working in the industry, you are the clinical research side, there are documents, you always sign a non-confidentiality disclosure. It's just part of the industry. And there are also a lot of safeguards regarding maintaining confidentiality of the patients and the project itself, right? And then a contract in clinical trials, it's pretty much the same like in any other industry. And it's basically a written, dated, and signed document between two parties that tells you what kinds of obligations that they're going to have in relation, as they're on this working on the clinical trial. Now, in our industry, the protocol typically serves as the basis of the contract. So once the protocol is written, it's approved, by the regulatory authority, or and then it's approved by the ethics committee. That is, then we say, okay, great. This clinical research site is going to participate in this clinical research study. We also have other types of contracts from the sponsor side. If I'm running a global study, there's certain vendors that I might want to use. I have to sign a contract with them. It's typically called a scope of work. What are they going to do on the project, and how will all of that pan out, right? So I will sign. So there are various levels of contracts in the clinical research industry. Okay. The coordinating committee. A coordinating committee is typically identified by a sponsor to organize the conduct of a multi-center trial. Now, there are various types here, and this is a bit vague on purpose, because in clinical trials, there are different committees based on what type of trial it is and what level. So at the basic level, you can have a coordinating committee that is assigned just maybe due to the large number of clinical research sites, they help with the operational piece of it. But you've probably heard of a steering committee on a clinical trial, which really assists the program or the portfolio managers on how to run the trial. I mean, they can be involved in financial aspects of the trial, the deliverables, the timelines, and really monitoring that at a high level. We can also have a data monitoring board, which looks at the types of data that is coming from the whole project as a whole, and determines based on what the trial is about. I mean, you can have a data monitoring board that is looking at certain events that occur at the clinical research site, and based on that, they determine how to proceed with certain patients. So it's a board that just monitors everything. And then you can also have an adjudication committee, and it might be created to manage just safety events. Like if something happens to a patient and they take a look at it and say, okay, this is how we're going to proceed with addressing this situation. So those are some of the types of committees that are that participate in clinical research. Then the next one we have is a coordinating investigator. And a coordinating investigator is not common. I mean, it's usually an investigator who is assigned to run and manage the clinical research sites at multiple facilities, okay? So this coordinating investigator, I'll give an example. We're running the cassava study in Tanzania, okay? And the project is being run at maybe 15 different facilities in Dar es Salaam, right? And so we might say, okay, as the pharmaceutical company, it might be easier for us to have one coordinating investigator, maybe in the general hospital in Dar, who's very experienced. He's a key opinion leader. And so he can use his knowledge and expertise to really help the other principal investigators who are at the other research sites. Now, let me explain something here. Every clinical research site should have an investigator and a sub-investigator, and that's how it's supposed to be. You have the doctor and like an assistant doctor, but it's still, it's still a medical doctor, who's running the clinical trial. In this case, I'm talking about an let's call it the main doctor, who is helping these other clinical research doctors or principal investigators across various facilities. So that's a coordinating investigator. A contract research organization, and these are quite common. I don't know if you guys have heard of Quintals or Power Excel or things like that. So these are basically a company that has been contracted by a sponsor, and the sponsor is a person that is financially responsible for the trial to perform one or more trial duties and functions. So typically, when I manage trials globally, the CROs, I typically would have a scope of work with them and say, okay, they're going to manage maybe just the monitoring piece. Maybe we only need them to have individuals who go out to the clinical research site and, periodically look at the data and the regulatory documents. Or I basically say, okay, as the sponsor, we're handing this whole clinical research project to you. You are responsible for start looking for the clinical research sites, training them, setting, and then having them run the trial. You're responsible for monitoring the data, the safety piece. You are responsible for it. And at the end, you're going to hand everything through us. Of course, we're going to have oversight because a sponsor always has oversight. We don't just disappear, but you're responsible for that. So that's typically what CROs do. They might manage one aspect or they might manage various aspects of the clinical trial. Okay. Now, those are some of the definitions. I hope that it helps you as we're going on with this free series. It's really going to give you I think a deeper insight into some of the terms that govern this industry. And before proceeding, are you guys still there, alive, kicking? Because now I'm going to go into the fun stuff. So please raise your hand, do a thumbs up, tell me you're alive, you still have a pulse listening to all this stuff and you're not yawning or anything. Okay, okay. Yay, yeah, Molabane is alive and well. Anybody else? Okay, good. Okay, perfect. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to talk about the Ultimate Clinical Research Toolbox. So like I said before, this is one program within, our company, Achaibo Clinical. And the Ultimate Clinical Research Toolbox is online and offline. So what it means is that when you join the program, you have access to the modules that give you an insider information about how to manage clinical research trials. But then what we also do is that some people come in, they just want to set up a clinical research site or they want to work at a clinical research site, and that's fine. And then we also have a different path where you want to get into the industry. We help you to get into the industry and give you all the tools and resources that you need. Or if you're in the industry and you're stuck, because I always say life is about the constant evolution, right? I mean, you want to always make sure that you're moving forward and you're learning new things. And why suffer on your own when you can actually get help with somebody who has already done a lot of the things that you like to do? I still have a ton of mentors. I really believe in that. So why is this clinical research toolbox solution effective? So what we do is, again, if you're interested in career in the industry, we help you with that. You're stuck in the same role and you need to evolve, we help you with that. You want to set up a successful clinical research site and you don't know how to do it, we show you how to do that. You want to work at a clinical research site, this is for you. And then you have a clinical research site, but you're kind of stuck. You have come to the point where you've been getting all these trials, the industry has changed, and you're like, how do I acquire more trials? So we show you how to do that. And of course, I always say, if you want to make serious changes in your life, this is for you. If you just want to kind of, just sleepwalk through life, this is not for you, because we take this very seriously. I mean, I really believe that, I'm very passionate about giving people the tools and resources that they need to move forward with their lives. And that's what we do here at Achaibo Clinical. So how does it work, right? You have a monthly membership. You have the online program, which is at your own pace. And that's really important, because at the beginning, I basically had to like train people, and everybody has a different way of learning. So that's at your own pace. But then we have bi-monthly coaching calls. So twice a month, you come in, we do your coaching calls, answer all your questions, check your progress. And then once you're done, you get registered in our clinical research portal, depending on where you are. So if you are you wanna set up a clinical research site, and you do so, then you get come to our clinical research portal. We have you in there as a pre-qualified site. And then if you wanna have a career, then once we coach you and you're ready, then you get registered in our career database. And of course, you have a Facebook group that you always have access to. And the other thing I didn't mention is that you also have access to us via email. So we're really here to support your success. So now I'm going to go into I'll demo the online portion of the course. Resume sharing. No, I want to stop sharing. And I'm going to do a new share. That's how I speak to myself, so I remember. Okay, can't take these things too seriously. So here we are. This is the online version of the course. It gives you an overview of, again, good clinical research practices, the history of the industry. You have a toolbox which gives you just different um, ideas about what happens at a clinical research facility. And just to pause here, the reason why I'm very adamant about everybody knowing the basics that happens at a clinical research site is because in the industry, there are many people who come in and they struggle because they don't know what happens at a clinical research site. So they're managing things, and they have a good career, and then eventually they become stuck because they have not experienced the daily workings at a clinical research site. And that's where everything happens in clinical trials. So I always tell people, everybody should make sure that they go through this portion. Can you guys still see my screen? It says my screen sharing is paused. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. I guess I was
Okay.
talking about air here. Can you guys see it now?
Yes.
Oh, great, great. So I was saying that, this is the online piece. And I was saying that it's extremely important that you know what happens at a clinical research site, whether you choose to set one up or whether you choose to come into the industry and have a career, or whether you're in the industry and you don't know, um, you're in and you've never really been to a clinical research site. So that's why this course is that's why I created this online piece, to set a foundation, a really strong foundation for everyone who's in the industry. So that's what's there. You look at essential documents. You have an overview of what happens from when the study starts up to when it actually closes. We talk about, the various types of visits that occur at the clinical research site. And then, of course, I always love best practices, because that's what I'm really good at, and really giving you the best ways to manage projects at the clinical research site. And then you have bonuses for essential documents. And so this is the online piece. It's at your own pace, but the rest of it is meeting like we're meeting right now, answering your questions, coaching you, addressing concerns that you have, making sure that all your needs are met. And that's pretty much what it is. And then, of course, once you're complete, then you're now you become visible. you are a clinical research site, then when we speak to our clients, you automatically, get ready to acquire a clinical research project. If you're, looking for a career, and you've probably seen us on LinkedIn, we're really actively seeking. We're in a recruitment phase right now, because it starts happening at the fourth quarter. Many companies really like have to hire so they can meet their deliverables at the end of the year. So that's what typically happens. So there we have it. And let me do a new share. Let's go back here. And I talked about how you can join. So here's the URL on how to join the Ultimate Clinical Research Toolbox. If you want to know more about us, you can go to the website achaiboclinical.com, and it should give you some more details about who we are and why we are here, and why we are excited about serving you and ensuring that you take the next step in life. That's what life is about, right? Why be stuck when you can take the next step? And one of the reasons why I focus a lot on Africa, because it's already estimated that in the next 5 to 10 years, the number of clinical research projects being conducted on that continent is going to just, it's going to be like exponential. And there was no company providing this service out there, actually training people and giving them the tools and resources. And that's why I'm here. So that said, I want to thank you for listening, and let's go into the Q&A before we wrap up. So please, if you have a question, you can, oh, great. You can chat private, you can chat, you can unmute yourself and ask me a question. I'll be delighted to help you out.